Diolch, Llywydd. I'd like to begin, if I could, by correcting some comments made yesterday by the leader of the Conservatives, who claimed the ambulance waiting times in Wales were improving. In fact, the median response times to red calls are worse this winter than last winter. Fewer are arriving within the target 8 minutes. When it comes to amber calls, almost half are now taking longer than 30 minutes to arrive, almost twice as bad as last winter. And our excellent paramedics tell me they're really losing heart. Why are ambulances taking longer to arrive now in emergency and in urgent amber call cases than in previous years?
Well, the system was one that we introduced about 2 years ago. And when you look at where we were from the start of the new response model to where we are now, there's been a really significant improvement over that time. Comparing this winter to last winter, there has been a fall in performance of a couple of percentage points, but we're still meeting our targets. The challenge, though, is how do we understand, from a system point of view, the pressures we have had this winter, how much of that is genuinely exceptional? And on some days, as you'll be aware, we've had pressure that I generally do not think that any service could have planned for. But there is a broader point about the increasing demand we expect to see delivered in our system, and it's our ability to cope with that. And it's not just about the ambulances, it is a whole system response. So it is about continuing to improve on delayed transfers to make sure that people move through the hospital system. It is about continuing to improve on the work that is already being done to try and make sure that we don't unnecessarily go into hospital as well. I recognise too that there is a long tail on amber calls. That is not something that the government is looking at and saying that isn't a problem. There's work already being done by the Emergency Ambulance Services Committee, together with the ambulance services and health boards, to look at that and to look at what further we'll need to do. And there'll be choices for the health service to make and potential choices for the government to help the whole service to improve.
I agree entirely that we need a whole service approach. I'm saying that the whole system is broken. And it's the ambulances and paramedics and call centre staff that are having to bear the brunt. And you say you're meeting targets. There are no targets for amber calls, and that's a part of the problem. Behind the statistics, though, we must remember are some truly shocking stories. Let me recount two recent, very distressing cases. I'm told both on Anglesey, both the same day. And I can't imagine the distress caused to paramedics dealing with these cases. Or let alone to those people's families. First, chest pains, red call at Shorley. An ambulance turns up after an hour and 5 minutes. The patient has died. Suspected stroke, amber call. An ambulance arrives 10.5 hours later. The patient again was dead. Same day. Let me focus on that second case. It may be the case that whether an ambulance turns up to a suspected stroke patient in 8 minutes or 10 minutes doesn't make a difference to the outcome. But surely you agree that waiting hours for such a potentially serious condition to be addressed is unacceptable. Do you accept that removal of any time target for amber calls has forced under pressure ambulance staff to treat those calls as less of a priority and patients therefore have been put at risk?
Well, I have to say I'm incredibly disappointed with the remarks made at the start, claiming the whole system is broken. That simply is not true, and you should be embarrassed to say such a thing. I don't hide the challenges that exist.
You should be embarrassed.
I don't hide the challenges for our staff or citizens. To use such deliberately inflammatory language about our healthcare system, I think really does not reflect well on you, Rhys Iorwerth. I don't hide from the individual challenges and the individual points you make. I obviously can't comment on what happened in individual cases. But I'll remind you again about the reason and the rationale for introducing the clinical response model. Not simply clinical opinion, but the evidence about how we run our ambulance system and whether or not we're getting the right help to people in the most urgent and life-threatening cases. And the previous system, there was lots of evidence accepted by people across this chamber and outside, did not serve the interests of the patient well. We had a number of categories for an 8-minute response that simply did not make sense. We reviewed the evidence and it showed that, no surprise, that a 40-year-old system was out of date. We then had clinical evidence and advice on an improved system to prioritise people in the greatest need. That was supported by frontline paramedic staff. It was supported by leadership within the ambulance service and the wider health service. That's the model we've implemented. We have also, though, had an independent review of the new system, and that review is looking at the categorisation of calls. So rather than politicians arguing with each other which particular condition should be in which particular category, we're again looking at a proper evaluation and a proper basis upon which to make that choice. And that must be the right way to proceed. Not to have a campaign-led approach to which condition should be in which category, to have proper evidence and clinical advice on what to do, and then to do the right thing, by staff within the system and by the people of Wales we are supposed to be here to serve.
How dare you say that I should be embarrassed?
You should be embarrassed.
How dare you say that I should be embarrassed for suggesting that your system is broken? It is NHS staff on the front line, be it in ambulances or in accident and emergency units, who are telling me that the system is broken. You're in charge of the system, and we want a better system for the patients that deserve that, frankly, here in Wales. It's deeply upsetting for ambulance staff, whether in control centres or paramedics, on the road to witness and deal with cases where they wanted to and could have made a difference, but they were unable to because they were parked, because of the system, outside hospitals. It's perhaps no surprise that ambulance staff have the highest rates of staff sickness out of all NHS staff. I want that to change. And one factor we have to be doing, one thing we have to be doing here is involving the staff much more in debates about the future of our service. It's the staff on the front line who themselves know how the service can be improved. So will you give an undertaking to engage much more, with staff on the front line? Maybe you don't care. I do.
I do care, Reen, and they are.
And listen to their demands. Both paramedics on the road and control room staff, they need to be engaged with. They've got ideas. They're the ones on the front line. They deserve to be listened to.
Well, I make no apology for saying the NHS is not broken. I make no apology for being offended by the way you have approached this issue.
We're talking
I have met paramedics through the worst of times. When I was appointed as a Deputy Minister for Health at the time, and meeting paramedics at that time, they were angry and they were despondent. They wanted a system to change. They recognised they were in a mad rush to meet a target they did not believe, and they did not believe served the patient well or them as members of staff well. They were directly engaged in helping to change that system. We listened to what paramedics were saying to us at the time, and we continue to listen. I have spent a large amount of my time in this office in going out and directly listening to staff in their workplaces. I was with paramedics last week within North Wales. I was listening to them about the work they're doing to improve our healthcare system, the work on a trial being run in North Wales that I think is likely to be rolled out across the rest of the country, using advanced paramedics to improve out-of-hospital care to avoid unnecessary admissions. And we will continue to listen to our staff. We will continue to see them engaged, as there already are, as individuals in their workplaces, within their trade unions and their representatives, because this is a system that is looking to improve and to learn. And I think that if you spend more time with representatives in our system, the improvements that have taken place within these last 2 years, to look at the further improvements we are planning and trialling, I think you might take a slightly different perspective.